McConville is eager to share his thoughts with you as well, and I look forward to your questions and our continued partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. General McConville, please.
Well, I'd like to thank the Secretary for leading our Army during this critical time. Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Inhofe, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to be here today and for your continued support to the Army and our people, our soldiers, our families, our civilians, and our soldiers for life, our retirees and veterans. The Army currently has 485,000 active duty soldiers and a little more than 1 million in the total force. That is roughly the same size Army that we had on 9/11. Army soldiers are presently supporting combatant commanders around the world in more than 140 countries. They form the most lethal and decisive land force in the world, and they stand ready to fight and win the nation's wars as part of the joint force. I could not be more proud of each and every one of them. Since last October, the Army's priorities have been people, readiness, and modernization, making us well aligned with the emerging national security guidance. Putting people first means recruiting and retaining the best talent our nation has to offer, maximizing their potential and taking care of them. We are building a culture of cohesive teams that are highly trained, disciplined, and fit, where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. And that is how we prevent the harmful behaviors that hurt our soldiers and break trust with the American people. These being sexual assault and harassment, acts of racism and extremism, and death by suicide. All 3 of my children, 2 sons and a daughter, plus my son-in-law, are currently serving in the Army. Providing a safe and secure environment for our soldiers is not only my responsibility as the Chief of Staff of the Army, it's also a deeply held personal commitment. We win through our people. The best fighting forces in the world ensure that soldiers and their units are masters of their craft. This is why we are shifting to a foundational readiness model that prioritizes training at the company level and below first. The Army has rebuilt a high level of readiness with the support of Congress, but that readiness level is fragile. We must sustain that high level of readiness while continuing our most comprehensive transformation and modernization efforts in over 40 years. That is the only way we'll maintain our overmatch against near-peer competitors and would-be adversaries. This year, we are turning our multi-domain operations concepts into real doctrine. We're not only developing, but we're delivering our 6 modernization priorities, including our 31+4 signature systems. With new doctrine, organizations, and equipment, the Army is offering multiple options to our combatant commanders and multiple dilemmas to our competitors and adversaries. And we are doing so alongside our sister services and alongside our allies and partners. The U.S. Army never fights alone. We are the strongest land force in the world, and a great source of that strength comes from our allies and partners. As a people-based organization, we are uniquely qualified to foster these relationships. Thank you for your continued support to American sons and daughters in uniform. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General McConville. As I mentioned in my opening statement, and it's obvious to all, the focus on China as the pacing threat is taking up a lot of your attention and time. Also, with the decision to withdraw from Afghanistan, that is adding additional, I think, emphasis to the Indo-Pacific region. Secretary Wormuth, with your policy and strategy expertise, what do you see as the appropriate role of the Army in Indo-Pacific?
Thank you, Chairman. I think there are a number of roles for the Army in the Indo-PACOM AOR across the full spectrum of competition, if you will. First, I think the Army is uniquely well positioned to serve our nation in the competition phase. You know, many of the chiefs of defense in the countries in Asia are actually Army generals, and so they are particularly interested in partnerships with our Army, and I know General McConville has seen that in his many visits with his counterparts. We can use those relationships to increase our alliances and partnerships, to deepen our relationships with those countries, so that, as I said in my opening statement, in a time potentially where tensions are rising, we may be able to leverage those positive relationships for access that can be very helpful. And we're doing that with things like our security force assistance brigades, with elements of our multi-domain task force that right now is working out of JBLM in Washington, and that we're going to build on in the future. Then moving up the spectrum of competition into conflict, the Army, particularly with the modernization programs we are pursuing, can do a number of things. Provide long-range precision fires, again, through the numerous programs we have there to go after maritime and air targets. We can provide a layered air defense, which will help us in terms of the anti-access and area denial capabilities we face there. We're pursuing making sure we have a survivable, resilient network, which we know we're going to need given the counter space capabilities that we face. So I think, again, as part of the joint force, the Army can be very, very useful in terms of bringing options to the combatant commander in Indo-PACOM.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. General McConville, how do the Army modernization efforts complement and support the strategy that the Secretary just talked about?
Yes, Chairman. As we take a look at our modernization priorities, what they provide us is speed, they provide us range, and they provide us this concept of convergence when we bring together all the Army systems and the joint systems, and in the future even our allies and partners systems, and that gives us the decision dominance that we need, and quite frankly the overmatch we need to deter competitors and potential adversaries. I would argue that we get deterrence through strength. That strength comes from a strong joint force working together, and it comes from strong allies and partners, and we have strong allies and partners, as the Secretary said, in the region.
Thank you very much. Madam Secretary, you just returned from Fort Hood. Senator Inhofe and I went there in the wake of the serious situations that developed there. There are many factors involved, but obviously command climate, leadership engagement. One of the more disconcerting comments that I heard was from a sergeant major saying that the troops don't trust the commanders and the commanders don't know the troops. And that might be a function of constant deployments and constant activity, but still it can't be tolerated. Can you give us your comments and observations about the positive changes that you've made and will make?
Certainly. We're very focused on building cohesive teams down to the lowest level. So we have launched the This Is My Squad initiative, and the Sergeant Major of the Army is our point man on that effort. We are, as you know, completely redesigning the SHARP program. We are also restructuring our criminal investigative division so that, among other things, we will have more experienced investigators to handle these kinds of special victim crimes. And I want to share, one other thing I'll touch on before I share just an observation. A very important piece we've also undertaken is the command assessment program that really is revolutionizing how we're selecting future leaders and takes you into account their past performance on command climate. But I did a sensing session with soldiers, myself alone in the room, and one of the things I heard strongly was they feel that their commanders do care. I think they think their commanders have a lot of things on their plate that makes it hard for them to have time to care, but there was a sense of caring that was very clear.
Thank you very much. Senator Inhofe, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let's get another shot at the Army budget cuts. As I stated in my opening remarks, the Army bears the brunt of the disappointing President's budget request that prioritizes a domestic agenda over national defense. And I'm reminded also of the amendment that I had on there for parity between defense and non-defense I think this, I'll have to go back and check, but I think this is the first time in 10 years or so that we've actually come out and said parity is not something that is going to be pursued. And that's the first time this statement has been made in a recorded vote. General McConville, please describe the impact. I'll give you another shot at the same thing that you're just now talking about. And the risk of these cuts in the Army's ability to modernize the force for competition and, if necessary, if it should become necessary, conflict with China and Russia, and to fulfill its obligation to the other combatant commanders, which they'd have to do at the same time. Talk about capacity. Where do we stand with that now?
Well, Senators, as I said in my opening statement, the end strength of the United States Army is 485,000 on the active and a little over 1 million. When it comes to the total force, that's the same size Army that we had right before 9/11. And as we all know, we go to war with the Army we have, and we had to grow that Army during the conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq. And so we have frozen that end strength at 485. Would we like to have a bigger Army, depending on the strategy? Absolutely. But with the budget we have, we are trying to bring forward the best Army that can fight tonight and win, but also, what I would argue, more importantly, in the future, as we watch our strategic competitors continue to improve their capabilities. The budget gives us the most efficient capability when it comes to readiness. If we're going to send forces into harm's way, they have got to be ready. As the Secretary talked about, we're focusing on the squad, platoon, and company level to make sure that all those soldiers are ready to go. And then we have to modernize the Army. I would argue, every 40 years, the Army has to transform. It did in 1940, right before World War II. It did in 1980. When I came to the Army, most of the weapon systems we're using are 1980 vintage, and quite frankly, I think in 2020 we must do the same. So we have done all we can with the Secretary and myself to protect the modernization of the Army, and we believe we must do that. And I have outlined in my unfunded requirement letter to you those unfunded requirements that were not met within the budget.
Yeah, well, in general, that's, I'm the first to admit, with the budget that we have, you guys are just doing great. We don't have an adequate budget. That's the problem that we have. Let's look into the future of the cuts. It's always seemed like when the administration wants to cut defense, it goes after the Army first. And when President Obama reduced defense, he cut the Army's base budget by $70 billion and cut end strength by nearly 90,000. So that was a problem that we were dealing with at that time. These cuts led the Army with only one brigade combat team at the highest level of readiness. It took nearly half a decade and $100 billion of additional funding to fix it. Now, Secretary Wormuth, while the Army's worked hard in this request to preserve end strength and limit reductions to its highest modernization priorities, would this be possible with additional budget cuts the next year and the year after that? We all tend to look at where we are today, and I'm concerned right now with the trends that are out there, where we're going to be with budget cuts in the near future. What do you think?
Thank you, Senator Inhofe. As you know, Secretary Austin has undertaken both a new national defense strategy review as well as a global posture review. And we, of course, in the Army are participating in both of those efforts. And I think it will be very important in terms of looking to the future to look at how that new strategy is developed and what it requires the Army to do. And I would agree with you certainly that we are in a very, very tough international security environment. There is no shortage of threats. So I think as General McConville and I go forward into future POM builds, we're going to have to be looking carefully at what does the strategy call upon us to do? What do we think are the demands, the current demands from combatant commanders? And can we meet those current demands while also protecting our modernization efforts, which is going to be critical? And particularly having seen everything we're doing at Fort Hood, and again, the challenge of taking care of our people while also meeting current mission requirements, we're going to, I think we are having set end strength at 485,000. We are still under stress, particularly in certain areas like air defense, as you know. So we're going to be strong advocates going into the future budget discussions.
Yeah, well, I don't have any doubt of that, and I know that you're fully aware of the problems that would exist if we have reductions, which a lot of people, including myself, are concerned with. So I appreciate the fact that we have the two of you at the helm at this given time, but it's going to take more resources. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Inhofe. Senator Shaheen, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Secretary Wormuth and General McConville, for being here this morning and for your service. The National Guard plays a critical role both in adding to the total force of the Army, but also in the welfare of each of our states. I don't know how New Hampshire could have gotten through the last year and a half with the pandemic without the National Guard. We had the highest percentage of our force structure per capita activated in response to the Guard. And it's come to my attention that there was a recent letter sent by members of the Florida, California, and Texas congressional delegations to the Secretary of Defense that requested larger Guard in-strength levels in line with the per capita size of their states. For a small state like New Hampshire, that's especially troubling to think about what that means for the future. So can you talk about how we strike the balance between the needs of those large states and small states that have our Guard both working on state missions but are also being activated for the national missions as well?
Certainly, Senator Shaheen, and I would ask General McConville to expand on this. When it comes to looking at the National Guard, first I want to agree that they have done a fantastic job all around the country this year. It's really been incredible, whether it's been helping us respond to COVID, natural disasters, or securing the Capitol here more recently. I think, we need to look at both what the overseas requirements are for the National Guard and how they fit into our contingency plans with, around the world, whether it's Europe or in Asia. That's part of what we think about when it comes to looking at the size. But we also, of course, look at their support to civil authorities here at home and try to look at that very holistically. And, that is something we look at each year as we go through our total Army analysis. And I think, we would want to look carefully at making adjustments, particularly significant adjustments. But General McConville, you may want to add to that.
I think the Secretary, one thing I do want to say about the National Guard, this has been the year of the Army National Guard. Could not be more proud of what they have done in their communities. They have been there. They've been all over the place, and I just could not be more proud of them. And I think, Senator, it comes to balance. We have big states, we have little states. What we want to do is work with each of the states, make sure we know what their requirements are. As we transform the Army, we're working very closely with their leadership to make sure, we have certain states would like to have certain type units that are more beneficial for how they operate within the state, but also the type of people that want to serve in the Army. There's some states that have better opportunities than others. So as the Secretary said, we need to work very, very closely with them, with you all, and come forward with what the Army looks like, what the National Guard, what the total force looks like in the future.
So we shouldn't expect to see an announcement anytime soon that will dramatically cut the size of small states' Guard forces to the benefit of large states.
Senator, I would not you should not expect to see that. Again, if we're going to make adjustments to the distribution of Guard forces around the country, that's something that the Chief and I are going to want to look at carefully.
And consult with Congress, I assume.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Secretary Wormuth, in your opening statement, you talked about future conflicts being all-domain conflicts. Do you see hybrid warfare as an all-domain conflict?
Senator, I think certainly hybrid conflict or gray zone conflict, as some people refer to it, can take place in multiple domains. So, for example, you may have, the little green men that we saw that Russia put into Ukraine.
That we're still seeing in Ukraine.
Correct. While at the same time you see cyber warfare and information operations, for example. So I do think that hybrid or gray zone conflict can be multi-domain.
Well, where I'm going with this is concern about how we are preparing to respond to that kind of hybrid or gray zone warfare, because so far we have not been as successful as I would like to see us. And so how do we address that going forward as we're looking at preparing our Army?
I think we do need to do more in that area, and I would anticipate that that's something, again, that in the strategy review is going to be looked at, because I think we need to build out our thinking about how to operate effectively in that zone. In particular, in the Army, we first of all have been investing for some time now in additional cyber capabilities, for example. We've been paying attention to cybersecurity, but also building out our cyber protection teams and doing a lot of work with Army Cyber Command. We also see, in the multi-domain task force formation, an information operations capability, an electronic warfare capability, and those are the kinds of capabilities I think that we can, bring to bear in gray zone situations. We, of course, also have special forces, who can, go back to the more traditional, unconventional warfare that was sort of, some of their roots in the Cold War. So those are, I think, all things that the Army can do. But again, the chief may want to add.
So I think you make a very important point, and I think we find ourselves at an inflection point right now. Over the last 20 years, we've really focused on irregular warfare, counterinsurgency, counterterrorism. We have to be ready for gray zone hybrid, but really being contested in what we call every single domain. So, we're going to be contested in cyber, and then the question becomes, is that conflict, or how does that work? We're going to be contested with a lot of the type of systems that we use all the way back to the United States. And so we are preparing for that. The second thing is the information influence operations are going to change the way we operate in the future. I would argue in some cases information advantage may be more important than even the type of operations that are going on with the ground. We go back to some of the the Sun Tzu, winning without fighting. You can do that in some cases with information operations. Our competitors are not constrained the way they operate in that sphere, and we have to take that very seriously when it comes to cyber, information operations, and some of the other domains. And we are preparing our forces and our troops to be able to operate in that environment.
I couldn't agree more, having just come back from Europe, where they're very concerned about those operations in Russia. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Shane. Senator Ernst, please.
Thank you. There we go. Thank you both very much for coming to the committee this morning and for testifying in front of us, and most certainly and most importantly for your service to our great United States. I appreciate the efforts that you are truly making to put our people first. I think that is extremely important, but you also must meet mission requirements, modernize the force, and adapt to the new challenges and threats that we see presented before us. And as we withdraw from Afghanistan, which will be a significant emotional event for those that have been involved in actions there, as well as their families, I want to commend the force very much and thank them for their service and your leadership for the tremendous efforts and accomplishments that we have seen in that theater of operations. For 20 years, the Army, along with our joint force, our allies and partners, have kept those threats at bay and away from our homeland. So now, of course, the Army does face new challenges, and I'm very concerned about this administration's budget as it comes to meeting the needs of the Army. So, Madam Secretary, the Army is executing its modernization strategy per the 2018 NDAA. And you state that the gains you've made are real but fragile. And I agree. As the only service that's facing a real budget cuts this year, how do you intend to keep the gains that you have made?
Senator Ernst, I think to preserve the gains that we've made, we're going to have to balance, multiple dimensions of the Army inside of its budget. First, we're going to have to continue to seek wherever we can efficiencies and reforms. As you know, my predecessors and General McConville have done, a few cycles of what was called night court to be able to identify funding that we could move internally. We have, the big fish have been fished out of that pond. At this point, there are more small fish and minnows left there, but we need to keep seeking those efficiencies where we can. I think we need to, work with the Secretary and the combatant commanders to really scrub our current operational requirements to see if we can find places where we may be able to take pressure off of the Army. Mm-hmm. And then I think we'll have to look carefully at how we make sure with the resources that we have that we continue to put people first, but really protect those modernization programs. We're playing the long game now, and we have some time to be able to pursue our modernization program. But we're going to, we really need to keep that, I think, front and center, because our soldiers are our most important asset, and they need those new capabilities, those new next generation weapon systems to be able to execute their missions in the future. So we're going to have to, look very carefully across the whole budget going forward.
Yes, and I think this will be a very delicate balance as we move forward. And so both for you, Secretary, and for you, General McConville, as well, the budget significantly reduces the R&D funding, meaning that development, experimentation, and advancement as we are modernizing our force will be hamstrung, even as we're facing continuing evolving threats. So as we're making that balance, you've mentioned the unfunded requests that have gone forward. How would you prioritize, if you could, today, if we had unlimited dollars to send your direction, what would those priorities be and why?
And Senator, one of the things on the research and development, and I'll come back to priorities, is, we've aligned about 74% of our science and technology against the 31+4 systems, and so we've really moved everything we can do. So as far as priorities, we have some installation priorities. We often talk about what would be the top priorities. We have some people priorities right now that we would like to finish. We have barracks, we have housing, we have some child development centers that are all in there. It's about people first, and we would like to get those completed. They are in the unfunded requirements. We also have what we call enduring systems. We have focused on the 31+4, the modernization systems, but we also have Abrams tanks, we have Paladin howitzers, we have Apache helicopters, we have Blackhawks, we have other weapon systems that are going to be here enduring that we need to modernize our forces. We need to modernize the National Guard with, so they have the forces when they go off to conflict. And those systems are going to be around for the next 20, 30, 40 years. And so we are improving them. And as the new systems come on, some of those systems will be divested and some will not. And so those are where the priorities are, at least for the Army.
Thank you very much. I think that's an important point, is that while we are seeking to modernize the force, we do have legacy systems as well that will need to be maintained until we see the realization of modernization. So again, thank you both very much for your service. Trying times for all of us. We certainly are here to support. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Ernst. Senator Hirono, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Wormuth, first of all, congratulations on your well-deserved confirmation. Let me start with, we've all acknowledged the importance of strengthening our allies, and so what unique tools is the Army investing in to enable joint interoperability with our allies? And what can the Army do to further strengthen U.S. military relations with our allies and partners in the region? And I'm talking about particularly within the Indo-Pacific region.
understand, Senator Hirono. It's very nice to see you in person, and thank you for your well wishes. A few things in terms of interoperability with our partners. First of all, again, many of the countries in the Indo-PACOM AOR are led by chiefs of defense who come from their armies. So one thing that we have that I think helps us build our alliances and partnerships is those army to army relationships. And, they very much want to train with us, to exercise with us, to, learn from us, and in many cases, purchase our various weapon systems. So those are all things that we can build on. And those exercises are part of what helps us with building interoperability. We are moving with our Project Convergence campaign of learning that started last year and was largely Army-centric. This year it will be a joint undertaking, but we are building towards bringing together some of our allies and partners from the Indo-PACOM AOR to be able to work with us and experiment with us and look at using prototypes. So we also are working to try to bring our allies and partners in on the ground floor of developing these new joint warfighting concepts.
I think the mill-to-mill relationships have always been the area where we have strong alliances. And would you acknowledge also that diplomacy plays a major part in all of this?
Absolutely. And frankly, my own view is that to make the kind of progress that we would like to see, particularly in terms of access and being able to have more presence in the region, that has to be led by our diplomats. And the Department of Defense, the Department of State, the White House, we all need to work together. And frankly, we need to work with our agencies that have economic and trade responsibilities as well. But I think we need to have a whole of government approach to really help us get to where we want to be in that region.
I agree. So moving on the issue of sexual assault and harassment, Secretary Wormuth and General McConville, for a number of years now, senior DOD leaders have briefed us, basically from my seat countless times, on the need to eliminate the scourge of sexual violence in the military. And to the credit of the DOD and the military, yes, a number of attempts have been made, but we still are confronted with the scourge. And in fact, the Fort Hood report that came out at the end of last year described the installation as having, quote, a permissive environment for sexual assault, end quote, where junior enlisted personnel did not trust the chain of command. And I think you mentioned that there is a need to increase trust in the military. And it's not just in the sexual assault situation, of course, but in other instances. So for both of you, do you think moving sexual harassment investigations, for example, outside the chain of immediate chain of command would help to restore trust in the system?
Senator Hirono, I had the opportunity to go and visit Fort Hood last week and see firsthand, frankly, a lot of the steps that the Army is taking, at that installation in particular, to try to really get after the command climate issues. And I think where we are really going to see results in terms of driving down the prevalence of sexual harassment and sexual assault is through prevention. So I'm very interested in seeing things like the redesign of our SHARP program, doing the This Is My Squad initiative that really tries to bring leaders taking care of our soldiers down to the lowest level. That said, accountability is an important piece of the issue as well, and I think can play a role. I am open-minded to looking at how best to do that. I think increasing the specialization of our folks responsible for prosecuting these kinds of crimes would be beneficial. And I am open to looking at this and have been asked, to be a part of the conversation with Secretary Austin on this matter.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just do one short follow-up.
Yes, ma'am.
So I mentioned sexual harassment because right now that is not a separate charge under UCMJ, and I do have a bill to move in that direction. I certainly welcome your support of that. And yes, we want to move toward prevention, but there will be an effort to remove the prosecutorial discretion on investigations and prosecutions out of the chain of command. There will be an effort to do that with relating to sexual related offenses. I mentioned that because that is the direction that I think we need to go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rona. Senator Cotton, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for your appearance. Secretary Wormuth, when you were here for your confirmation hearing, you agreed with me that the Army University Press should not remove the term Union Army from its publications. Have you had a chance to address that issue yet?
Senator Cotton, I apologize. I have not had the chance to address that yet, given that I've been here 3 weeks. But as I said to you in my hearing, I will look into that and talk to the folks at Army University
Thank
Press.
you. I understand it's been a short time and you've got a lot of other pressing issues. But as I said then, as I'll say again, if it's good enough for U.S. Grant, I think it's good enough for our troopers today. For both Secretary Wormuth and General McConville, I want to speak to you about the nearly decade-long effort to replace the Army physical fitness test with the Army combat fitness test to test our soldiers on physical fitness that is a bit more applicable to the task on the battlefield, also to make it gender neutral. There are reports of further combat fitness test redesigns and changing standards associated with the test that have made for a somewhat confusing story and heated debate. Can you clarify for us the obstacles that are currently facing the combat fitness test, whether it will remain gender neutral, and how the Army is seeking to implement the test now?
Certainly, Senator, and again, I would ask General McConville to build on my answer, but first of all, it's very important that we have our soldiers be physically fit for a demanding environment on the future battlefield, and one of the reasons that the Army has pursued the ACFT is to try to raise our overall fitness level while reducing injuries. So that was, the impetus. We are continuing to look at how to finalize the design for the ACFT. We are continuing to have gender neutral standards. We have made some changes, as you know, moving from the leg tuck to making the plank an option. But we are waiting for the results of a study from RAND that has been, required by Congress. And we're not going to make any final decisions about the test until we have the results of that and we can understand how the test is going to both improve our fitness, but also potentially what it might do in terms of our ability to recruit specialized skills like cyber and doctors and things of that nature. But why don't I let the Chief build?
I think the science behind the Army Combat Fitness Test is really about reducing injuries. As we've taken a look at the Army Physical Fitness Test in fact, I was there when it was implemented. I hate to say it was 40 years ago. And it's time to transform that test to take advantage of the capabilities we have today. As we take a look at it, as the Secretary said, we are examining the impact on the force. I took it last week for record. I think it's a good test. And what we want to do is move forward in implementation based on the study. And I think it's going to have a more fit force, which is something that we need as we move in the future.
You want to share your score for the record?
478 for the record.
That's good. I'm sure all your Joes around the world are going to try to beat that now.
That's right.
General, are you committed as well to maintaining gender neutrality on the test?
I am.
Is there any consideration to pegging scores towards branch or MOS?
Well, I think the future, at least if I could make a recommendation, the future is as we move to more of a talent management model in the Army. If you're Airborne Ranger, which is a fitness type organization, you're in the 101st Airborne Division, you're in the 82nd. Well, I would say from talent management, you want people with a certain level of fitness. If you're doing something else that, you're a neurosurgeon, you might be more concerned with that person can operate at a level 6 level than, lead the, battalion and PT. So I think what we want to get to is, at least I do, is move away from an industrial age personnel management system to a 21st century talent management system where we recruit people, we select people, and we quite frankly promote people based on knowledge, skills, behaviors that they have within their specialized area. But we still want a certain level of fitness in the Army.
Yeah, I think the Army needs to consider that. Loading around into a tank gun or howitzer has to be done whether you're a man or a woman.
That's right.
It requires a certain level of physical fitness, but that's a different level of physical fitness than it takes to be a flight surgeon or to be a cybersecurity specialist. One last question for you, General. In the last decade, I think maybe when you were Vice Chief, the Army stood up the Security Force Assistance Brigades.
Yes.
They were primarily active in Afghanistan. Now that we'll be out of Afghanistan in a few weeks, and our national security strategy has postured towards competition against near-peer rivals like China and Russia, what do you see as the future of those SFABs, and what role are they going to play for the Army in the future?
No, they are in tremendous demand. The question was, what are you doing in Indo-Pacific? The 5th Security Force Assistance Brigade is active. They are employed. They are building partner and allies capacity and capability, and quite frankly, they are one of the hottest items that are out in each combatant commanders, providing great options to professionalizing the force within these countries. As we talked about, we're getting our strength not only from having a strong military, but through our allies and partners, and they are instrumental in doing that, and they are building tremendous relationships for us right now as we speak. So each of the Security Force Assistance Brigades is oriented to a combatant commander, and they are using them in very well.
Thank you, General. Thank you, Secretary.
Thank you, Senator Cotton. Senator Kelly, if you're ready, you could be recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and appreciate you having this hearing today. Thank you to Secretary Wormuth and General McConville. Secretary Wormuth, Arizona is home to some of the Army's most capable test ranges, like Fort Huachuca's Electronic Proving Ground and the Yuma Proving Ground. Both installations play an important role in the mission of Army Futures Command, and also an important role in for DevCom. At Yuma alone, 30% of the workload is dedicated to DevCom developmental testing. Yuma is also the home of, or the host of Project Convergence, a critical modernization project designed to further integrate the Army into the joint force and test the effectiveness of concepts and equipment that will prepare us for future conflicts. The defense contractor workforce at these ranges works side by side with uniformed and civilian personnel to execute the mission. Now, I'm concerned by reductions in funding for these range support functions. At the Electronic Proving Grounds at Fort Huachuca and Yuma Proving Ground is seeing some of these funding reductions. These are premier testing sites for the advanced systems that will modernize America's Army. It is critical that we invest not only in programs, but in range infrastructure. It's often the thing that's left out. But also investing in the workforce that allows us to make leaps in technology, providing our soldiers with the best equipment to meet the challenges of tomorrow. Secretary Wormuth, what would be the risks involved in decreasing funding for test range support, including for the government and contractor workforce, at a time when modernization is a top priority of the Army?
Thank you, Senator Kelly. As you mentioned, Arizona and Yuma is going to be the host for Project Convergence, has been. I'm excited to go out there this fall and see the next Project Convergence, which we are scaling up. To your question, we have, given the budget that the Army has, we have made some difficult choices, but we have done everything we can to protect our modernization programs and the testing facilities and ranges that we believe are needed to support those programs, as well as the contractors to support that kind of testing. That said, I have not yet been able to come out to Yuma and Fort Huachuca, and would welcome doing that in the future and talking with you about your concerns, because again, we are going to, it's very important that we preserve adequate ranges to do the kind of testing that we need for the future. So this is something I'd be happy to work with you on and have a dialogue about.
I appreciate that. I would love to visit with you at Fort Huachuca, at Yuma Proving Ground. If we're going to stay ahead of our adversaries, we're going to do it by out-innovating them. And to out-innovating our near-peer adversaries, we need to test the equipment. So we need ranges and test centers that can support those functions. General, for the past 20 years, the Army has focused efforts and resources on conflicts in the Middle East. At the same time, our adversaries were we're focused on outpacing us through military modernization efforts. Modernization is critical to staying ahead of our adversaries, and when done effectively, can function as a deterrent. We know that future wars will look different than current conflicts, and the Army will need to use resources and equipment efficiently across a range of domains to meet tomorrow's challenges. Knowing the important role that basic research plays, are you concerned about the decreases to Army science and technology funding, and is there a plan to reinvest in this area for future years?
Oh, as we take a look at the budget, we're always concerned about making cuts. And, what the Secretary and myself have to do is we have to look across the portfolio and determine what are the must-dos. And so for science and technology, we have reoriented our resources so they are focused on our top priorities. I think it's like 71 and 72% of our research and development, our science and technology dollars are focused on delivering the 31+4 top systems. And could we use more money in those other areas? Absolutely. But the Secretary and myself have got to make tough decisions, and those tough decisions are based on the priorities we need to be effective in the future.
Thank you, General, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Kelly. Let me now recognize Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, just a quick question for you. Kingsport, Tennessee has the Holston ammunition facility, and it's a main supplier of explosive materials to the Department of Defense. And Holston is on the Army's unfunded priorities list, along with similar facilities there in Virginia, Missouri, Pennsylvania, and Iowa. Total request for modernization is $40 million. And these are basically World War II era facilities. And we need that money for modernization of these facilities. So I would call this to your attention, and I would ask that you commit to me that you will work on this to modernize these facilities.
Thank you, Senator Blackburn. It's nice to see you in person, first of all. As General McConville developed the unfunded requirements list, those are obviously things that we'd like to have if we had additional funding, and we've tried to give you a sense of how we would prioritize them. As the chief just said, with the resources we've had to make difficult choices, but certainly going forward, I would commit to you to look into the ammunition facilities there and try to, for myself, develop a better idea of how it fits in with other places in the country that provide similar capabilities to us.
And I think it's appropriate that we review that, but that we make certain we have modernized these facilities because they are a part of our supply chain, if you will. In general, good to see you. There are a lot of people from Fort Campbell that fondly remember your and Ms. McConville's time on post, and so we thank you for that. O&M cuts and our concerns that are around these, given the aviation mishaps that have occurred, not only with the Guard, but also with the 160th SOAR. And I know that you are very familiar with these incidences. So talk to me a little bit about how we're going to get in behind this equipment. I know that you have heard, I have heard it from some of our men and women where they get the order to make it work when they are doing maintenance and repair or find a way to get to yes. And we want to be smart. Sometimes shortcuts do not serve us well. And our men and women in uniform deserve to know that when they get into that equipment is going to allow them to fulfill their mission.
No, first of all, Senator, thank you. And, I got a special place in my heart at Fort Campbell, and I have two kids serving there, and it's very special. And you make a great point on Army aviation. Our pilots have to have the flying hours to train. They have to have that, and our maintainers have to have the time to maintain those aircraft, and they have to have the resources. And so as we pressurize the budget, as we push on these type things, we start, especially with trends, as the Secretary talked about. I worry about trends, because trends start moving you in a certain direction, and you slowly start taking away things, just a few less hours, a few more this, a few more those type things. Then you find out you have some very serious concerns. So I am concerned about that. I am committed to making sure that our units have the flying hours that they need to be proficient, and really more than proficient, that they can do their job in combat. And I'm committed to making sure that they're getting the parts and they have the expertise to maintain those aircraft.
Well, and as you know, I went to bat more than once to get dollars for those flying hours and to make certain that those were there. I've got additional questions for each of you, but my time is going to be running out. I will submit these to writing. In general, I'm going to come to you with a question on end strength as it relates to this budget. I am very concerned about the impact that is having on our military personnel and their families, the uncertainty that has inserted into their lives. So thank each of you for your time and your service. And Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Blackburn. Let me recognize Senator Blumenthal, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, both of you, for being here this morning. Thank you for your service. I don't know whether you have seen the report by the Associated Press on weapons belonging to all of the military services that have been lost or stolen and apparently have been unaccounted for. I hope you have. I commend it to you. And this report is absolutely blood-curdling. The idea that pistols, assault weapons, grenade launchers are missing from armories of the United States military because they have been lost or stolen without any apparent accounting, without any reporting to Congress or to the FBI or to the agency, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, that may have jurisdiction as well, is just incredibly alarming and astonishing. And I would like to get from both of you what you know about it and your commitment that you will in fact investigate these reports.
Senator, I did see that report in the press, and certainly we take this situation very, very seriously. We train our soldiers to maintain accountability of their weapons. That is a basic skill and responsibility that we expect from our soldiers. My understanding is that the cases of weapons from any branch of the services being unaccounted for and getting into the hands of civilians is likely to be a small number, but particularly given these reports, I commit to you that this is something that we will look into and certainly make sure we have situational awareness of that situation in the Army.
Well, this is a public report, and 1,900 firearms is not exactly a small number. Apparently, a substantial number are used in crimes, have been recovered at crime scene, which is really mind-boggling and blood-curdling. And I would like to know whether you will commit, as the Pentagon used to do, sharing annual updates about lost or stolen firearms with Congress, whether you will resume that regular reporting.
Sorry, hit the wrong button. Senator, again, we do take these reports very seriously, and I absolutely commit to you to look into this and share what we know. and get back to you on
I don't mean to interrupt, and I apologize, but will you commit to reporting to Congress as was the practice?
Senator, I think what I can commit to is we can share with you everything we in the Army understand about our weapons.
And will you support a reporting requirement generally to the Department of Defense?
I think we'd be open to a reporting requirement.
This report says that the Army and the Air Force could not answer basic questions about missing weapons. It says also, quote, the Army sought to suppress information on missing weapons and gave misleading numbers that contradict internal memos. Will you report back to us about that claim?
Senator, I'd be happy to look into how we've handled this issue.
Do you know whether it's true?
I do not, Senator. I do not know what our past practice going back years has been on this matter.
The report says further, the AP began asking the Army for details on missing weapons in 2011 and filed a formal request a year later for records of guns listed as missing, lost, stolen, or recovered. Apparently, the report quotes an official as saying, you're dealing with millions of weapons, but we're supposed to have 100% recon, right? We're not allowed a discrepancy on that, but there's so much room for discrepancy, which indicates to me that there's systemic failure at every level. A failure to keep track of the weapons, a failure to report up the chain, a failure to report to Congress, a failure to report to law enforcement. Do you disagree?
Senator, I'm not, again, familiar with the details of the story, so I don't want to speculate. I don't want to characterize how the Army has handled it to date without having the facts. But I would certainly commit to collecting the facts and continuing to talk with you about this important issue.
Thank you. Well, I really appreciate it, and I know that you're new to the job. Welcome to your first committee hearing. Sorry to hit you with this topic, but I think you will agree with me that it is profoundly important that the military keep track of stolen or missing weapons. I hope we can agree on that point.
Of course.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. Senator Hawley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Madam Secretary, General McConville. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your service. Let me just start with one of our priorities in Missouri, which is to ensure that all of our service members have the best possible quality of life. And one of the challenges that we're facing in Missouri at Fort Leonard Wood is to make sure that the homes that were built there in the 1960s that are overdue for replacement get replaced in a timely fashion, and that we're able to provide quality housing. So can you just give us an update on what the Army is doing to facilitate replacements for these homes? And Madam Secretary, we'll start with you. General can add as you see fit.
Certainly, Senator, thank you. And General McConville probably can speak to the details at Fort Leonard Wood better than I. But as you know, we have reorganized how we're dealing with privatized housing to basically make a four-star general responsible. And we meet now weekly to go over the family housing at each of our major installations. We now have 37 out of 44 installations that have privatized housing have fully implemented the Tenant Bill of Rights. We expect to have the other 7 compliant with the Tenant Bill of Rights by the end of July. So this is something that we're working on very, very hard. I would ask General McConville to speak directly to the Fort Leonard Wood installation.
Yeah, I'll just from a priority standpoint, the reason we came out with people as the number one priority was that kind of drives where the resources are going to go. And then within the people portfolio, housing is the number one priority. And within our, a couple things that we've been working as the Secretary talked about is we have privatized housing. We're putting billions of dollars back into that. Probably about 25% of our housing right now needs to be fixed. And so some of that is privatized, and we are working with the privatized housing, and they have raised money to put additional money in to improve that housing. The Army housing that the Army owns, which is about 10 to 15%, we had historical housing. It wasn't historical housing, it was old housing. And to me, old is not historical. You have a 100-year-old house, it needs to be fixed. And for a while there, we were trying to fix it at historical rates. Put old windows back that look like old windows, those type of things. So we've got an exception to that. So we're putting more money into that. We're also putting additional funds into housing to get after that, because we want quality housing. I'll need to come back to you on precisely what we're doing there, and we'll come back to you on that.
Great, thank you very much. Thanks to both of you. Thank you, General. We'll follow up with you on that. Let's shift to our pacing theater, if we could. General, you released the Chief of Staff of the Army paper number 1 this past March. One of the things the paper said that caught my attention is, I'm quoting you here, "Our adversaries will attempt to achieve their strategic goals without fighting, or to seize their objectives quickly as a fait accompli." I want to commend you for highlighting that scenario in the paper. Along those lines, give us a sense of how you see the Army's long-range precision fires and their enablers being able to help deter, or if we have to, defeat a Chinese fait accompli in Taiwan.
Yeah, I think when we talk about long-range precision fires, and when you think about the threats that we could face as far as deterrence, many of our strategic competitors have set up what we call an anti-access air denial capability with an integrated air and missile defense capability. So you need something that can penetrate that and suppress that. And by having land-based long-range fires, you start to provide options to the COCOM commander to do that. Part of our portfolio in the long-range precision fires is also having a land-based anti-ship capability. So then again, you have the ability to hold competitive ships at risk, and they all come together to give that combatant commander multiple options, and really to present multiple dilemmas to those who may be wishing us hard. And then by doing that and having those capabilities 24/7, you can deter certain types of behavior from a strength standpoint.
Let me just ask you as a follow-up to that. TRADOC's December 2018 publication, which was called The Army Multi-Domain Operations in 2028, stated that the Army must demonstrate the ability to immediately deny a fait accompli in order to deter an adversary like China. You still agree with that, I assume?
I do.
Along those same lines, Madam Secretary, when you and I visited last month, you highlighted, I thought this was really good, one of the things you said was that China would like to pull off a fait accompli because it would be much harder for us to dislodge them from Taiwan than to stop them from getting to Taiwan in the first place. Can you just elaborate on that? I thought that was such a crystal clear explanation of the dangers in fait accompli scenario. So can you just elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes, Senator, happy to do that. Essentially, given the anti-access area denial capabilities that China now possesses, if they are able to achieve a lodgment on Taiwan, we will not have the kind of air superiority, for example, that we've had in things like the Gulf War in the last 20 years. And so it will be much harder to essentially eject Chinese forces from Taiwan once they land there than it would be to stop them coming across the straits to begin with. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible to dislodge them, but it will be a tougher fight. So my own view is we want to develop the kinds of capabilities that we're pursuing in the Army, along with the rest of the joint force, to basically present a sufficiently strong deterrent force to make the Chinese continue to think twice year after year about whether they want to actually undertake that amphibious landing.
Very good. My time has expired, General. I wanted to ask you about the PACOM's 1251 report and what that means for the Army's posture in that region. So I'll give that to you as a question for the record, and I'll follow up with you about Fort Leonard Wood. Thank you both very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hawley. Now let me recognize via WebEx Senator Gillibrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Wormuth, you and I have talked about the scourge of sexual violence in the military at length, and you understand that for the last 8 years, this committee has been trying to have a vote on a bright line to take out all serious crimes from the chain of command, to create a more professional system, to create an unbiased system, to create a system where our trained military prosecutors can make the first judgment about whether a case should go to trial. As you know, about 3% of commanders have the right to make this decision about whether a case should go to court-martial. So if the prosecutor decides a case should not go forward, it will go back to that 3% of commanders, who then will have the opportunity to do a summary court-martial or a special court-martial, or charge a related or lesser crime and get NJP. So given this, I would like your assessment of whether this is a recommendation that you will support, number one. I know in your written testimony you intend to take all 70 recommendations from the Fort Hood Independent Review Commission, which, as you know, suggests taking sexual assault out of the chain of command and creating an independent SHARP program. So you've already said you support that. What is your assessment of a bright line at all serious crimes? And as part of your analysis, I'd like you to consider the data that has been developed by the military and the report by Protect Our Defenders that showed that Black and Brown service members are up to 2.5 times more likely to be punished for serious crimes than their white counterparts. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about how you see reforming the military justice system so that's fair, unbiased, and guarantees civil rights and civil liberties for all service members.
Thank you, Senator Gillibrand, and thank you, first of all, for your leadership on this issue. You've been working on this issue for years. It's a problem that we all want to solve, that I know all senior leaders and all leaders in the Army want to solve. So appreciate everything you have done. A few thoughts. As I said earlier with Senator Hirono, I do think that focusing on prevention and doing more on the prevention side is, I think, where we will really see more success in reducing the prevalence of sexual harassment and sexual assault in our military. But accountability is important. I think
Secretary Wormuth, can you speak to why you think prevention is the panacea here? Because we've passed over a dozen laws to implement prevention measure, and the GAO reviewed all the laws we've passed on prevention, and what they found that more than 30 recommendations in prior work specifically related to DoD's effort to prevent sexual assault and address the needs of certain populations in the sexual assault prevention and response efforts. But they found that a lot of the recommendations and laws that we passed just haven't been implemented. So what change do you imagine would have to happen for the command and the DoD to take the prevention measures seriously, given that we've given you 8 years of prevention measures and they're not being implemented?
Senator, first, I don't think prevention is a panacea. I think we have to pursue this problem across a spectrum from prevention to accountability. So I want to be clear on that. I think really what we have to focus on is pushing responsibility for a positive command climate, caring for our soldiers down to the lowest level possible. And that is what we are trying to do through the This Is My Squad initiative, through the redesign of our SHARP program, and also through, frankly, selecting our leaders, looking more closely at their previous command climate performance. So making sure the people we put in charge are people who have been able to create positive command climates. I think all of that will be helpful. And that's something we're going to have to work hard on, and work hard on year after year after year, not just sort of when there's a crisis and then we become complacent.
But do you not think that actually prosecuting sexual assailants who are predators, who are often recidivists, and putting them in jail would also prevent crimes, since we have many examples of sexual assaulters who were not prosecuted in the first instance and went on to not only assault others, including children, as one of the most recent examples. Don't you think it would be far better to actually treat these cases appropriately and put sexual predators in jail?
We do absolutely have to hold perpetrators and predators accountable. And it is for that reason that one of the things I think makes a lot of sense is increasing the specialization of the individuals in the Army and in the military writ large who prosecute these cases. I think one of the recommendations that we've seen is to basically help our both our investigators and our prosecutors build more specialization in special victims crimes. And given the complexity and sensitive nature of those kinds of crimes, that's something that I'm open-minded to and think would be beneficial for us.
And will you review for this committee the issues of racial disparity and the recommendations that by giving the decision-making to trained prosecutors, you can also eliminate bias with regard to racism?
Senator, what I've been focused on in my time in the job so far has been specifically the sexual harassment and sexual assault set of crimes. So that is where I have been focused. It is clear that there are disparities in our justice system for people of color. I have not been able to look into that in depth, but my initial assessment of this issue, or I should say my initial sense of this issue, is that some of those disparities may be happening more on the investigation side of the ledger rather than on the prosecution side, but this is something I would want to study further.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Gillibrand. Now let me recognize Senator Tuberville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for being here today. General, and your family service. You got all your kids in the military. That's awesome. You know, I'm a people person. You know, we had our budget. You had your budget cut, and you know, we need things to fight with. But the number one thing we need is people. You know, with the cuts, how do we address pay and pay raises for our troops with this inflation rising every day, 5%? It looks like there's no stop to it. How do we, number one, how do we recruit, and how do we pay our troops with the cuts that we're having? Both of you.
Senator Tuberville, good to see you. Why don't I start? I would say, you know, on the recruiting side, we are, you know, it's a tough environment. As you said, we're competing against all sorts of companies that are starting to increase their wages and so on. We're trying to bring in 61,000 soldiers this year. We think we're on track for that. But we are, you know, sending out a large number of recruiters to really showcase all of the things that the Army can offer to people all around the country who want to join. As part of that, in the PB22 budget, we have a 2.7% pay increase for our soldiers. And that's a pretty good pay increase. I think we look carefully at that issue. We also have, as you know, our tuition assistance program, which is very popular with soldiers. So we really try to use a range of the things that we do to be able to bring in the quality best and brightest that we need in the Army every year to keep us, you know, healthy and at the size that we need. General, do you want to build on that?
Yeah, thank you. And, you know, we're very thankful that our soldiers and our civilians got a pay raise this year, and we're very appreciative of that, and we think that's extremely important. But as the Secretary said, we're in a war for talent. With young men and women. The advantage we have in the Army, and we have to continue to work this, is they want purpose in their life. They want to belong to a team, and we can do both of that for them. And once we get them in, we have to compete for their talents and make sure that that we're putting them in a place where we're taking full advantage of their talents. And we're actually being fairly successful with that. We wake up every day making sure we can maintain the all-volunteer force. We want a force where there's no harmful behaviors, so parents are looking at us and, hey, this is a good place that I want to send my kids, and this is a great place to get ahead for working class people. They can go to school and get an education and get discipline and all those wonderful things. And so that's what we're doing, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Speaking of recruiting, Secretary, you probably didn't have anything to do with this, but last month, the Army released an animated marketing campaign titled The Calling. I'm sure you're familiar with that, which was aimed at reaching the General Z audience with its storylines. This campaign cost approximately $4 million to produce. The campaign received so many negative comments, the Army took the comment section down. The Army should seek to recruit the best and brightest to protect our country, regardless of their background, because it's the generals and the captains and lieutenants' job, once they get there, to build them into a fighting force. My staff has asked for performance metrics on the campaign. Can I get your commitment that we will be given a thorough briefing on the quantitative measures?
Senator, we'd be happy to brief you on the campaign and what we know about, you know, how well it's performed. I would also just like to emphasize that, as the General said, you know, we are in a war for talent. We are trying to reach, you know, young people around America, all across the country from all sorts of different backgrounds. We're trying to recruit, you know, Generation Z and those younger than them, and the days of Super Bowl ads maybe have been replaced by YouTube and other things. So part of what we're doing is trying to also figure out, you know, which innovative recruiting techniques is most successful and resonates with all sorts of folks around the country. But I would be happy to come back and brief you on the campaign.
Yeah, thank
your
you.
convenience.
It's important that we get the best because they don't make a lot. And as General said here, we're fighting big tech. You're fighting people that are going to be paying a lot more money. I've got buddies in the Army, been in there for a long time, and they struggle. Them and their families. As a lot of people across this country struggle, especially with the times that we're in right now. We just got to take care of our people first, because that's our lifeblood. And we were talking to Selective Service not too long ago. We discussed this: 35 million people eligible for the draft, only 450,000 eligible to serve in our military. That's scary. That's really scary. So we've got to do everything possible to sell the point that the military is somewhere that they can come get a great education, a great life, raise their families, and be great Americans. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Tuberville. Let me recognize Senator King, please.
Madam Secretary, my first piece of advice is don't talk about Super Bowl ads not working to a former football coach.
Good point.
I want to welcome you to the committee, congratulate you on your nomination and confirmation. Page 4 of the charts that you gave us, I'm a little confused, and I want to get to the terminology to really get a fix on what this budget, how this budget really works. OCO seems to have disappeared. OCO was a significant part of the budget over the last 4 or 5 years. It's not in your chart. There's a little dotted line, but you talk about direct war costs and enduring costs of about 18 billion. Is that what we used to call OCO? General, you're nodding.
Essentially, yes, Senator King. I think, there's been a debate, as you undoubtedly know, for years about trying to ensure we were providing sufficient transparency into the budget.
Listen, I agree. I've always been skeptical of OCO as a kind of slush up and down. So what you're really proposing is a higher base budget with less OCO, and I presume part of it, OCO last year was about 24 billion under your formulation. It's about this, what we are thinking of as OCO, direct war and enduring cost, 18. Does that reflect in some measure the reduction of costs in Afghanistan, for example?
There is a small reduction in costs associated with our retrograde out of Afghanistan, Senator, but I don't believe it's a large one.
Okay, so, but you are, hopefully we're going to have a little more transparent budget in the future where OCO is, the expenditures on war costs are part of the budget. Is that correct?
That is the goal, yes.
Okay, thank you. General McConville, you used the word convergence in one of the answers to your question in terms of joint operability. One of your colleagues the other day said he had to pry data out of one of the other service branches. We've got joint operations. That was Goldwater Nichols. My sense is, however, we need more in the way of joint compatibility of software and capability acquisition. Is that a sensible thing to be talking about?
Absolutely, Senator. And one of the things that we've done, and I've done in conjunction with the other service chiefs, is we've set up what we call the Joint Systems Integration Lab at Aberdeen, because the future of convergence is really the ability to pass data from system to system and to do it in a contested environment. And if you want to pass from F-35 to some type of weapon system on the ground or some type of sensor, what that allows us to do is go up there and figure out how to move that data, test it, and then we go out into Yuma and do project convergence in the dirt. You've already got a way to do that. So we are spending.
This is sort of the 21st century version of the phones not talking to each other in Grenada, where we couldn't communicate.
Well, I think what we're doing, Senator, is making sure that we can pass data between all the different types of systems we have in the joint system. That's what the intent is, and then next year we go to make sure we can do it with our allies and partners.
I'll look forward to working with you on that, because I think that's a very important point going forward. Missile defense and deterrence. Iron Dome appears to be a very effective system as it's been operating in Israel. It saved a lot of lives. We were involved in the development of Iron Dome. Are we taking advantage of that capability, and is that something?
Yes, Senator. We
you're
have,
deploying?
as I think you know, we have 2 batteries right now. We're going through the process of training our soldiers on that, and that is the interim program. And what we're working with them and some others is how does that fit into our integrated air and missile defense system? We want to be able to pass data from all the different systems. The future is you have multiple sensors and you have multiple shooters, and you use an integrated battle command system for integrated air and missile defense. It'll take the information from the different sensors, it'll pick the right shooter, and then you get the most efficient capability when it comes to protecting our forces against air threats.
So we're back to convergence of data and software.
Yes, we are, Senator.
And my final question is, my concern is defense against hypersonics. That strikes me as a significant strategic challenge for this country. Is this something that's in your area with the Army, or is this again a joint enterprise? Because certainly the Navy has to worry about hypersonics.
Well, we're all concerned about that, and I think we could take that in a different forum with the Missile Defense Agency and talk through probably in another forum the best where we are on that, Senator.
Fine, thank you. Thank you both. Thank you for your service. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator King. And now let me recognize via WebEx Senator Rosen.
Well, thank you, Chairman Reed. Of course, Ranking Member Inhofe, I really appreciate you holding this hearing, and I'd love to thank the witnesses for testifying today and for their service. I'd like to speak a little bit about Hawthorne Army Depot, which is located in Nevada. So Secretary Wormuth, Nevada's Hawthorne Army Depot, it is the world's largest ammunition depot and demilitarization facility. Depot stores and demilitarizes munitions. It ensures munitions readiness for DoD, amongst other things. It also supports the services by hosting military training. It has very unique terrain all throughout Nevada. We have with the Air Force Nevada Test and Training Range, and of course up in northern Nevada, Fallon Naval Air Station. So we have unique Afghanistan-like terrain throughout Nevada. So in 2005, there were attempts to close Hawthorne, but it is mission critical, and again, it is the world's largest ammunition depot. I'm grateful that its closure did not come to fruition. So given Hawthorne's contributions to our national security, will you commit to working with me to ensure that the depot continues its important work serving our war fighters?
Senator, I'd be happy to work with you on making sure that we continue to keep the capabilities at Hawthorne that we need. It sounds like they offer a variety of capabilities to our Army, and I would look forward to gaining a more in-depth understanding of Hawthorne and again, making sure that it fits into future Army requirements.
Thank you. I'd like to move on to a little bit of tactical cybersecurity, because of course Senator King brought that up. We're going to have convergence of data and software, hardware, software, firmware, all of it, multiple points of vulnerability. Every time we add something on, we can create a new stress point or a new access point. So General McConville, in recent years, Army Cyber Command, you've been fielding units to enhance our ground commanders' tactical cyber capabilities such as intelligence, information, cyber, electronic warfare, and space detachment, and the 915th Cyber Warfare Battalion. So, General McConville, what are the Army's plans for the growth of this mission, and in which theaters do you see the Army employing these cyber units? Is it something that you envision for the Indo-Pacific with our NATO allies, or possibly in Iraq, Syria, or Afghanistan? I'm just curious how you see it expanding.
Well, Senator, right now, when you talk about, we have to use an acronym, but it's ITQs, which is Intelligence, Information, Cyber, Electronic Warfare, and Space. We're standing up the new multi-domain task force that has that capability at Joint Base Lewis McChord, with the focus on the Indo-Pacific. The second multi-domain task force is being stood up inside of Europe, and we are looking at a third for the Pacific, and we're in the process of developing that also. We see this capability is extremely important for the future. We see in the competition space, in the crisis space, the notion that we're going to have these type capabilities, and we are in the process of staying those organizations up and bringing them to fruition.
Well, I'd like to build on that, because how do you envision retaining these high-skilled cyber soldiers when NCOs, warrants, and even officers can find more lucrative and more balanced work-life opportunities in cybersecurity jobs in the private sector? So you not only have to grow up your staff, train them, retrain them, and upskill them, and there's always new technology, obviously, but how are you going to keep the people you have?
Well, I think that's a great question. With some of the people that are willing to stay in the Army, sometimes they surprise me. I was just down at the software factory at Austin, Texas, and we just stood this up because we're going to need people with these type of capabilities. And there's a specialist at E4 down there that, quite frankly, was a medic in our Army. And when we put out a call for coders, he answered the call, and he's probably one of the best in the Army, and in the other people in that organization have masters and PhDs recognize him as one of the very, very best we have. So we got to have a talent management path for him, and for others like him, that they may become warrant officers or they may become incentivized based on their level of experience. And what we find is, if we can give them a good wage and have them doing what they want to do, they will stay in the Army, and they really like the mission that they have. And even though they go outside and probably make a little more money, they really appreciate the mission. That's the feedback I get from the cyber operators that we have within Cyber Command.
Well, thank you. I hope that we can help you. Senator Blackburn and I introduced a Civilian Cybersecurity Reserve Act to help you with the Civilian Cyber Reserve Corps. And so I look forward to working with you on that soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Rose. And Senator Sullivan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the witnesses being here. Thanks for your service. Last week, I shared this chart with Secretary Austin, General Milley, on the prioritization of the Biden administration with regard to our military. And I asked them the question, how do you tell our troops that you're prioritized when you're clearly not? If you can see this, and I'll make sure you have a copy for the record, almost every federal agency in the U.S. government is getting double-digit increases with inflation, which is now unfortunately creeping up to 5%. The U.S. military budget, Homeland Security budget, is actually getting decreased. I find it completely unacceptable. I asked the two leaders of the Pentagon, how do you tell the troops that you're prioritizing our military? They tried to answer. It's a tough question, because I'm sure that they probably didn't like the budget that they had to come to the Hill and defend. And Madam Secretary General, digging deeper, the Army, I mean, you guys are getting gutted. Let's call it like it is. Madam Secretary, in your confirmation hearing, you told this committee you do not want the Army to be the bill payer for everybody else. You are the bill payer right now. 4% cuts without inflation. With inflation, you're almost double-digit numbers. This is like 2015 when the Obama-Biden administration was trying to cut 40,000 troops from the U.S. Army, active duty. They did it. How do you explain this to your forces? This is tough on you. I know you didn't like this. I know you didn't like being the bill payer, but you are. How are you telling your troops right now that the U.S. Army is prioritized? And why do you think you are taking it on the chin in terms of your budget? Madam Secretary, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan. I think what I tell our soldiers when I talk with them is that I'm confident that at the budget we have, we are able to...
Is this the budget you wanted? Almost
certainly,
10%
I
cut
think
in the Army
I
with
would
inflation?
certainly welcome additional funds. Having seen, for example, barracks at Fort Hood, I would absolutely welcome additional
General, is this the
funding.
Army you advocated for? Sorry to interrupt.
Well, Senator, I did...
This is a huge issue. It's not getting nearly enough attention.
Yeah.
The Biden administration is blowing out the federal government, $6 trillion in spending, okay? But with regard to the U.S. Army, they're saying, sorry guys, ladies, you're getting nothing. So this is a real problem. General?
No, I I laid out our requirements. We have our budget, and then we have our unfunded requirements that I sent a letter to this committee and all the other committees that lay out if we can get additional money, that's where we want to put it, and we would like to get that additional money.
Well, I'm going to advocate strongly for additional money for the U.S. Army. I think this is dangerous, and I think it's clear that the Biden administration does not prioritize the military, but it really doesn't prioritize the Army. Let me ask, a lot of your testimony, I've been watching all morning, talks about tough choices. I agree with you. You have tough choices. General, you've done a phenomenal job, your leadership, on addressing what is a huge challenge with the U.S. Army in Alaska. In the last 5 years, we've had 32 suicides. We've only had 41, and every death's horrible, combat deaths in Afghanistan in the same time frame. I just want to get your commitment that when you make tough choices, the work you're doing on addressing suicide in one of the most important places in the country, my state, is not going to be one of these tough choices that you leave on the cutting room floor because the Biden administration won't fund the damn Army. Can I get your commitment on that? Lives are at stake.
Absolutely. It's about people first, Senator. You have my full commitment on that.
Madam Secretary?
Yes, you have.
Let me
Yes,
finally
you have my
ask.
commitment as well.
Can I just get a quick update? I know that Madam Secretary, you committed to me you and General McConville to brief me on the Arctic plan from the Army. We're getting mixed messages. Secretary of Defense in his confirmation hearing said he was going to fully resource Arctic strategies of all the services. General Milley said the same last week at the hearing. But General Van Herk in his hearing last week, he mentioned that the DoD budget, this budget, is inching along, didn't move the ball very far down the field in terms of military Arctic strategy. And as you know, as Northcom commander, he's the advocate. Can I just get an update from the two of you on that strategy, which I think you've done a great job on? And I look forward to the briefing I'm going to be getting from both of you here in the next couple of weeks.
Senator Sullivan, we have resourced, in this year's budget, the Arctic strategy that the Army put forward to you. And I have not lost track of my commitment to come and brief you, so I'm looking forward to doing that as well. I don't know if General McConville has anything else to add.
No, I think, as Senator, you and I talked about, the strategy is focused on being able to operate in the Arctic, which is a little different than operating from Alaska. And we're putting that together. We'll have more an operational command up there. You tend to have an administrative command right now, but as you take a look at the fact that you're going to want to compete up there, we're taking a look, and we've talked about the type of organizations we'll put in there. We've got some more coordination to do, but we have a vision of where we want to go, and that is funded in the resources we have right now. There's some other collaboration that needs to be done on the type of units, and we have a striker brigade up there, and as we take a look at what that future of that brigade looks like, that may change, and that's where we're having a discussion right now.
Good, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan. Senator Kane, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to continue along the lines of my colleague, Senator Sullivan, on the budget issues. And I think, the key is this committee has to make a decision. The president's given us a budget. We have to make a decision about what we think is right. But I want to dig into this question of the Biden administration proposal, and is it a, quote, cut? I'm looking at a document, and it's the fit-up that the Trump administration sent to us last year in April 2020. Page 195, table 616, this was the Trump administration's proposal for Army funding. FY 2021, it was $177 billion. But in this table, the Trump administration predicted, their projection was that in FY 2022, they were going to make the Army undergo a 10% cut. I'm looking at this table, and it shows FY 2021, $177 billion, but they project that the Army was going to drop to $164 billion in FY 2022. That was the Trump administration's plan that they submitted to Congress last April. The Biden administration didn't follow the Trump plan for $164 billion. My understanding, I think I'm correct, is that the top line that's now before us is $173 billion. Am I right about the top line in the president's budget that it's 173 billion, not 164 billion?
Yes, Senator, that's right.
At what point in your budget deliberations did you switch from the Trump era projection of 100